Welcome to Rollwise, the show where we talk about all things tabletop role playing. Today, we're going to be giving kind of our debrief, our postmortem from our recent playthroughs in Cyberpunk Red. We're going to talk about kind of our first impressions, all the way to thoughts that we think about from a GM's perspective and replayability. So, if you like these kind of conversations, don't hesitate to like, subscribe, leave some comments for us to respond to down below. And I think with that, we can pretty much get into it.
Yeah.
So with the game, I mean, we're talking about Cyberpunk Red. We've done a few videos on this, so hopefully it doesn't feel like people like we're over talking about this. But this has been a bucket list game of mine. This was published by our Telesorian Games. It focuses on the cyberpunk genre, and I mean, from our perspective, we found that between 2 players and 4 players or 3 players, I kind of lean towards more players is a little bit better. I think that probably there's a certain player size that it gets a little bit too crazy. But between the two tables, did you prefer 3 or 2 players, do you think, guys?
I don't think there's really a difference, personally. When I GM'd, it was 2 players, and I think it makes a fine buddy cop system. Yeah, I think it works fine. You do have to kind of think about the adventures, and but like none of the character defining traits really are going to impact. You may have a problem if you don't have a solo, is what I would say. Like if you don't have a combat character, but everybody can fight reasonably well. Like my solo didn't outperform anybody fantastically well, I don't think, in either of the scenarios as far as fighting.
Sure. Yeah. It just seemed for me, it seemed like I felt less like you guys were on the edge in terms of like potential deadliness. Because I mean, the game being so deadly, having a few more characters just at least to make sure that you don't die immediately can be kind of helpful. But combat is fast, and I think we'll talk about that in a moment. But really, it was Jeff and I's first time playing the game. Brent has got a little bit of cyberpunk art under his belt already. So I want to throw the question to you, Jeff. First time sitting down to play, what were your initial thoughts when you got into it?
I really enjoyed it. Started with character creation. I don't know if it's that I'm more in touch with the setting than I am with some other ones, or that it speaks to me a little bit more, but I thought that I really got into both of my characters, which sometimes I struggle with. That doesn't come very naturally to me.
Okay.
So I really enjoyed playing. I loved it. I would play Cyberpunk again, like almost anywhere at not much notice.
Yeah. And why do you think you got more in touch with these characters than some of the other characters that we played? Like, for example, just going to Castles and Crusades. What was it about the cyberpunk system, do you think, that you resonated with a little more?
It felt snappier. I felt more like I was actually doing stuff to affect the game rather than the game was doing a whole bunch of things to affect me. And it's just my take, but that's how it felt.
And I think I have a theory on
yeah.
modern games and near modern games. Is it's easier to get into characters in modern games and near modern games because you don't have that dissonance that you get with fantasy games, where like I know how a human acts when they're being shot at, potentially even a human, or in an action movie, I know how a human acts when they get shot at. Whereas in like a fantasy setting, sometimes it's like, well, how is my dwarf going to react to this? Because they're not really human. They have different motivations and stuff like that. You can also use colloquial language, like the language that we use every day in Cyberpunk Red, and it won't feel out of place. Like sometimes I have dissonance with fantasy settings where it's like, oh, I want to say the F word, but they probably wouldn't say that. Or some other like way that you talk, like you're probably not going to hear the orc say bro to somebody in Castles and Crusades, whereas you can have a speech affectation like that in Cyberpunk or like a near modern or modern game. So I think it's just easier to get into the characters that way.
Sure.
It's not too big of a leap.
Yeah. Did you feel that there was any benefit for having kind of defined your character through the life path system that was a little bit above and beyond what you had done?
I think that was part of it.
Sure.
It felt to me like it was part of it because I could understand some of the motivations a little bit better. A lot of games like Dungeons and Dragons, you create your character, but the backstory is all on you. which I think is why we end up with a lot of edgelords in D&D, because it's
Both parents are dead.
You mean our group specifically, or you mean in general?
I think D&D characters in general, but I haven't played a ton of D&D recently, so
I agree.
Hopefully people are bringing new takes on fantasy characters instead of, oh, my parents are dead, all my friends are dead, and now it's time for payback.
But I think that's also that's again, I feel like that speaks to like the modern thing or near modern thing again, where it's like, if I have family, I can see sending them money as a cyberpunk character. Whereas like some of your fantasy characters, it's like, I'm gonna go into town and find a courier to send this. Like, it seems stranger in that sort of setting.
Sure.
Yeah. I'm just gonna to mail them a bag of gold. Don't take any of it.
Right. Yeah. Like, you'd have to do a lot of research on how like usury works in a medieval setting. Like, how does this stuff work? I mean, and it's even weirder because in a medieval setting, like, usually people wouldn't go more than 3 miles away from where they were born. Probably, you're not going to travel.
Have you played a D&D game with an evil moneylender charging outrageous interest, like loan shark interest rates?
No, I haven't, but
I haven't either.
There should be.
But I kind of want to now.
I feel like that's not too much of a stretch. I mean, it makes sense. It makes sense. Yeah, because I have to say that, in terms of the game and everything like that, my first impression was, I mean, first of all, it's a hefty book. I feel like lately I've been getting all books that are in that 400-page range, so it presents kind of a daunting task to get into the book, read it from cover to cover, and then start to really understand what's going on. And because we go fairly quickly through this, I'm sure that there's stuff that as you read it, there's some little things here and there. I really like the fact that it felt like they were really doing a good job putting the characters and the setting first, and so you got to really jump in. They do a good job putting in the right mindset. They include little stories and snippets and examples that kind of take you through a cast of characters that are very, very much give you the feel for how the game should be played and everything like that. And I really liked how that came to be. I'm also a big fan of whenever, like, I don't know when this happened, but there was at some point I was like, just give me a type of a weapon, and then that's the type of weapon. I can make it look however the fuck I want. I really don't have to like, oh, because I have the gold-plated Beretta, that does a different.
It's because there's 37 halberds in D&D. That's why. Like, that was one of the things that always spoke to me, is like, these aren't that different.
So is it 37 halberds and 107 assorted pole arms, or
that? Yeah. Well, yeah. Like in Cyberpunk Red used to have that. Like Cyberpunk, not Red, but Cyberpunk did have that problem. Like, it's a very
2020.
It's a very gun porn heavy game. Like, it's very like you have your solo's handbook. That's like, it's just like a pamphlet, like 100-page pamphlet of guns and weapons and cyberware.
And that has its taste on some level, I'm sure, for people that really like the idea of having near future sci-fi type weapons and all that kind of stuff. But there's a simplicity to me that it's like, well, mechanically I want it to be over here. Aesthetically, let the people just decide, like, let the people choose. And I kind of like those kind of things. Also, I really liked how, even though you created these kind of unique characters based on the role that they were selecting, I did like how there was kind of a divorce from the role, from like their skills, and you could really put whatever kind of character you wanted together. There was a lot of good that as I was reading through it, there was a lot that happened in those pages and everything like that. I think really got me pulled into the game.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I like the most about the game is you can vary what your character is based on skills, but then the one like defining thing that each class gets, the solo and their combat awareness, the medic and their medic ability, the lawman and their ability to call for backup. Like, I think those, like, and that means that you can have a situation where like, oh, I have 2 solos in the game, but they're radically different people.
Correct.
And I feel that makes the characters feel more human too, as instead of like a stamped kind of archetype.
Yep. Yeah, and I think that's good, because it unlike, I mean, when you go to D&D, all fighters are so close. I mean, they're essentially maybe a Venn diagram. there's some separation, but you definitely don't get as much separation that you do in Cyberpunk, because you could have two solos that have such different focus that you're like, okay, well, that's how this guy goes, that's how this guy goes, even though that core ability is combat related. I mean,
Yeah.
it does give you a lot.
Well, yeah, and optimization is different too. You could have, I mean, and it
Mhm.
sounds silly, but like you could have the solo that's good with the bat, handguns. You can make versatility, or you could just have that solo that's intimidating and have like a high cool and some of that other stuff too. Like, I think
never
that's
has to lift a finger.
I think that's really neat. Is you can customize and that helps make them feel human. It makes them feel like the fact that you can point and say it's different. I'm different than that solo. Makes them feel human. And like I said, I really do think that having a modern setting, your self-insertion is a little bit easier, because you can kind of squint your eyes and it's easier to see the world that way than like, I don't know, some fantasy settings are a lot more difficult in my opinion.
Sure. Yep. And just to wrap that part up about it, I do really like the fact that there are 3 like guiding principles plus a 4th asterisk, break these rules kind of thing that they decided to put into there, because I feel like sometimes you get a little bit lost in the sauce and you forget, what's the main thing that you're really trying to accomplish. And in this case, because they're like, okay, well, you have to live on the edge, you have to, the rule of cool, like these are your guiding principles and the rest should feed into how that plays out. I do think that that's a nice touch that they added to the game right out of the gate.
One thing I did want to say about the book is I think the book is almost 90% background, isn't it? Like, it's mostly flavor, isn't it? Flavor text.
It's got a lot of rules. There's a
It's
ton
like
of
Night City, and
there's a lot of background in it, but there's a lot of rules in the beginning, especially. I could look, but
well, no, I mean, it's not important. I'm just more curious because there's a lot of like Night City is pretty well fleshed out. And I think that's another thing that makes the world kind of easy to feel, is you can get a really good idea of what Night City is, and being as it's not so far flung, it's just Night City. Like, you can get really familiar with, which has both its pros and cons, but you at least know what the city feels like. Like, you can picture the city and its feel, even if you wind up changing like boroughs and buildings and everything like that, but you can really get a feeling for it.
Yeah, and I have to say, there's, and maybe we save this for another section just in a little bit, but in terms of book organization and everything like that, if I were to at least start the idea of a complaint, I think the book probably could use a revision somewhere in there, because
it's a well-written book, but it's not a well-organized book.
Yeah, it's tough. And first of all, I mean, I don't mind it when you get, because there's style in the game, right? But naming your chapters "Getting It Done," "Friday Night Firefight," and not having a really well, elaborate index, you can really struggle on a page to find exactly what you're looking for unless you've bookmarked it or something like that already in the past.
What did I try to look up last time we played? The tactic skill, and it wasn't in the index. Which
and it's like,
it seems odd.
That's pretty terrible.
Yeah, it does.
Well,
you need a good index in a role-playing book, especially a large one.
Yeah, and I mean, you have the skills page, which takes you to where it is, but you now know where the full list of skills is. Okay, well, now I have to look through all that. You can't go directly to that skill thing.
It does the classic Cyberpunk thing game that Shadowrun and Cyberpunk both have, where it's skills page 49, see page 53, see page 181.
there is a little bit of that. So I mean, and I don't want to dog on this too much, but I would have to say that if they do a second edition of Red, which I don't know if they would do a second edition of Red, or if they would just make the next edition, because I mean, it seems like they just make the next.
They would advance the timeline and probably
it feels like they have a chance in the next timeline to get that book a little bit better organized, so that it's easier for you to flip through to get to the stuff that you need. Because like when you want to know how to like heal yourself, like healing, repair, rest, recovery, like there's none of those words.
Right. What's weird is it's very concise when you find it, though. It's just finding it is hard. Like when we were looking at the auto fire rules the other night, when we were looking those up, like once you found it, it was like, oh yeah, it's all right here. It's auto fire does this, this, and this. This is the pros. This is the cons. But like finding it was like,
Yeah. And so and that's where it gets like that's where it's one of those things where it's just like, okay, well, I want to look up auto fire. I looked under A for auto fire. Sorry, no. You look under ranged combat. No. Then you look under combat. Okay, you know what I'm saying? You're having to draw back higher and
Exactly.
higher.
Yeah.
And so it's and don't get me wrong, like you could like people can argue about indexing to the end of time as to like how it should be indexes,
Sure.
what should be
Right.
indexed, and how
Yeah.
do you make it.
Definitely.
But there was just for whatever reason I didn't find the index to be as
Well, kind of
helpful
like what I said about the skills. If you look up the skills, like the first page you find the skills on, it's like descriptions of the skills, like flavor descriptions.
Mhm.
And then it says what you actually want to do is list it on a different page and has the page number at the bottom of the skills. And that should all be together. Like that should all be in the same
think so.
chapter.
You think so? So yeah. So I mean, from first impression standpoint, I had a positive first impression. It sounds like Jeff had a pretty positive impression as well. So correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, but I think it was it was a good start. So
No, it's a good game. I always forget how easy, because there's so many stats and so many skills. And I think one person commented on this that they said they checked out when they saw that there were 10 attributes, or we said that there were 10 attributes in our character creation video. And I understand how that looks daunting at first. There's lots of skills and there's lots of character creation, but like it's not really. It's pretty intuitive once you learn the rules. D10 plus your stat plus your skill. And then also like character creation is easy because you don't have to, like, if you don't want to mess with the minutia of going through all that, they give you ways to shortcut everything.
Yeah. Yep. And you can go from all the way done for you pretty much with the template to a little bit of wiggle room in there. So you can adjust how much effort you want to put into it right there. But in general, for character customization and everything like that, if people are interested to watch how we went through our character customization for Cyberpunk Red, we'll link the video from when we went through that a week or a little bit of time ago from whenever today is, sometime in the past. So if you want to catch that, see how we did, see what if any mistakes we made, or how did you like the characters that we made, let us know. That'd be great. So mechanics and kind of the flow of the game. So once we got playing, how did the mechanics feel to you guys? Brent, why don't you go ahead and start off on that one?
No, I think they're good. I think they're easy once you get the idea. You have to reference once you know what you're adding together, you don't even really need their full-fledged character sheet. Because you can just, you have your stat and you have your skill and you can just add them together. And the 1d10 plus skill level and stat, I think is good. I think it's quality. You also don't feel super faily all the time because of the game. Like you don't feel like you fail all the time, which is kind of nice. We of course did multiple times. But it didn't feel like we were failing at every single juncture. It is more of a trad game where like you roll more, it's a bigger book. Right. It has more rules. There's a bit of crunch to it, but I think one of the interesting things about the game is like you can ignore the crunch really if you want and just stick to regular dice rolls. You don't really need to use the maneuvers and stuff if you really don't want to. And so I think it's very customizable and flexible, and I think overall it's a good system.
Okay. Jeff, how did you felt the gameplay mechanics and flow did through this?
The general ones, I agree with Brent. We picked up on them really fast, and they after the first one or two times, they felt pretty intuitive. I had things that felt like my character did really, really well, and then things where it's like there's no reason why my character would have any business doing anything like that.
Yeah, but that's more. I feel like. To your point, I feel like that's more of a like character choice thing, than a mechanics thing. Because I think you feel like you have a decent chance of doing it even with your skill. But there are things where it's like, like negotiation or being friendly. Like for my character, like that wasn't a thing he was going to do. No, I'm not going to persuade him to do anything because I don't care if he says no. I'm just going to punch him in the face if he says no. Like so, it was more of my character's not good at that, but he's also not that guy.
You're right,
and it's very clearly defined because of the background process, which I think is kind of cool.
But so I'll jump back to mechanics. I thought that they were fine. There was stuff that we didn't know, and then we had to look up that made the game drag a little bit. and we already talked about how finding some of it was hard. Most of those made sense. So mechanically, I thought it handled everything we threw at it, and we did go at a couple of problems sideways instead of head on. Although there was a lot of head on.
My character was Mr. Head On.
No, it was Mr. Bob.
Mr. Bob. Mr. Bob approached things with his head first, that's for sure.
Well, so okay, well let's target some questions here, because I personally thought the gameplay mechanics were like, for skill checks and everything like that, were pretty good. However, ranged combat is probably one area I'd like to dive in a little bit deeper with you guys. What did you guys think about the whole DV of reflex can allow you to dodge bullets, or having to establish a DV based on range? Like, I mean, I had a chart that I was using, but did you like that concept of wherever your characters move to, that created a different difficulty band, or how did that feel to you guys?
It felt fine to me, because it still feels like it's the GM's setting a difficulty value, because we're not using a map, we can't specifically say what range it's at. So just being like, yeah, just hit this number feels normal, like any other theater of the mind stuff.
Sure.
Yeah, I think most go ahead and finish.
Yes, they're closer now. Yes, they're further away is fine for me. So I think that's fine.
I think any game with range combat, shots further out, and you can debate what constitutes further out. Is it 40 yards or 50 yards or 60 yards or 70 yards, depending on the weapon? But as long as there's groupings of short, medium, long, impossible, it should be harder to hit at the further out ranges.
And I think one of the things that I think this is in the original Cyberpunk book, like the original Cyberpunk book, there's a discourse they write out. They have a little essay on gunfights, real gunfights. And like, I think that the breakdown, at least at the time, and this is old information now, the statistics may have changed since then, but like at the time that they wrote it, they said that like most gunfights with any lethality are done at like 10 feet. So with that concept, they kind of designed like that's how the combat kind of plays out, and I think it still does a little. And I know you didn't like the auto fire rules, because the numbers get sort of wacky with the auto fire rules.
A little bit.
But I really feel like, one, it's dangerous, and I don't know the reality of controlling a assault rifle at close range. Like, I don't know how effective really it is at close range. I mean, if you're spraying into a group of people, it's probably pretty aggressive.
I've seen videos where some people can control it, and videos where other people can't even remotely control it.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is like it's a hard thing to control, and I think that's what they're trying to simulate with that being that weird like that. So, but it's hard to say. You could always customize it, I think.
Yeah. What were your thoughts, Mike? Obviously, you were not thrilled.
It wasn't that I wasn't thrilled. I just thought it was probably the area that requires the most massaging, especially as a new person to the system. Because it feels like the game has, it has a lot of like things are resolved via combat. Like that's how you get your edge runners to the goal half the time, is that there's a person you have to kill, I guess. But that probably changes via groups and everything like that. But Night City's a dangerous place. There's always gangers or whatever around every corner. But I felt that the way the weapons worked, it meant that it was like hard for me to really like just know a number that you would use. And so like when I looked at that chart was like, okay, this band, they like all 8 weapon categories have different DVs, then a different DV, then a different DV. So that would be the longest one to really do. And I think as a beginning GM in this, your goal is just, as you said, Brent, if you don't use battle maps, which we're a group that uses theater of the mind for almost everything, you're just going to have to like estimate, and then you and the players are going to have to decide. And I like how Fallout did it. Are you moving one band closer, one band farther away? Kind of using that rather than saying I move up 27.2 meters towards the target and then try to blast him. You know what I'm saying? Like that.
Yeah, like I said, I just don't think you need. I don't think you need to worry about it.
You don't need to get into that, and I think that's something.
I think one of the reasons that's in the game is I believe there's a miniatures game that either came out first or came out at the same time, and they basically just used the same rules and ported them over.
And it might be that they really wanted it to be more of a tactical game in that sense, where they wanted you to pull out the battle map and have your cargo container set up. And that's fine. I mean, no game should have to be one or the other. It's just that it seems like it would be better served if you use miniatures in a battle map.
I will say one thing that when I ran the game
Mhm.
for my little group, one of the things that one of the players hated is there's no modifiers for cover. You're either in cover or you're out of cover. Like you either can see them or you can't. There's no in between. There's no like partial cover or anything like that. And the goal is to either get them back within like sight or eliminate the cover by chewing through its hit points by just shooting it a bunch. And I think that's interesting. And I think it's way simpler than you're in partial cover, you get a +5, a +3.
It's simpler. I mean, it's just a different way to abstract it, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that's true. And I honestly like the cover. I also liked how the cover, even if the cover got shredded, it effectively still prevented you from taking overflow damage. So even though now you've lost cover, it just opened you up to whoever's next in the initiative order, rather than being like, okay, well, I did 38 points of damage to the cover, 14 points was absorbed by the cover, 13 points was absorbed by your armor. How much, you didn't have to worry about all that kind of mathematics and stuff. But speaking of getting hit by bullets, what do you guys think about the infinite dodge of people with a reflex of 8? Like, that just was so weird to me.
I think it's fine because it's trying to emulate the that Cyberpunk. Your combat guy is wired and he can move out of the way of bullets.
But do you think that in order to really tap into that, there should be some sort of speedware or whatever it's called? Like a normal person just being able to Matrix style dodge everybody because they have a reflex of 8. It feels like that opens itself to a little bit of min-maxing, where if you have a group that's heavy on the combat, everyone's going to have a reflex of 8 because then everyone can dodge bullets or attempt to dodge bullets.
Yeah, but then they're going to be bad at other things. So like there's things that they're going to be bad at. So I think there's a trade-off there. I feel like it's better balanced. I feel like it's better balanced than just saying there's a dump stat and a king stat. Because really, honestly, you're going to get unlucky rolling that dodge eventually, and you better have armor.
Right.
Because your armor is what's going to matter more than that reflex save, most likely.
Sure. Yeah, I found it to be one of those things that I was having a hard time wrapping my head around, that if you just have a reflex of 8, you get to not necessarily dodge bullets, but you can at least make it far harder for the person shooting to hit you on the regular. Because
I will say I do think 2 solos you're going to have a very long combat if it's 2 solos shooting and or
potentially
or meleeing, because there's going to be attacks, dodges, armor. Their combat abilities, like you're going to have a lot of stuff going on.
Brent, the proper name for that fight is it's going to be epic.
Well, it will be. It'll definitely be something, but it'll be long, most likely.
It very well could be. Yeah, and like I said, it was just a weird thing for me to wrap my head around, because I was like, oh, you can dodge that, like, because there's no cap on it. Like almost every other game we play is like, oh, you want to defend, you either have to expend your action in your upcoming turn, or you get 1 free action per, you know what I'm saying, or a number. But it seemed like if I had all of my people focus fire on Brent, and you had a reflex of 8, right, Brent? You could have literally Neo'd the situation, and it's like, well, okay, sure, why not? I thought that was the only thing that kind of stretched it a little bit from my perspective.
I just think your luck's gonna run out eventually. Like focus fire, like basically what they've emulated here is what really happens in a firefight, which is everybody shoots 1 person. Like everybody focus fires on, oh, that guy is dangerous, shoot him.
Shoot him. Exactly.
Yeah, and I think that's what's going to happen is like, sure, I can try and dodge all these bullets, but I think that might be an auto fire thing too. There might be a penalty to your dodge roll if there's an auto fire.
I don't recall off the top of my head,
but yeah, gunfights are dangerous.
Yep.
Yeah,
and that's true. And it just, And I just thought it was interesting because I do feel like there is an edge that you can get from having the reflex of 8. It may not, and obviously we didn't all have reflexes of 8 in our groups in our 2 different tables that we played. So it's hard to say if that became like the king stat or it could be a king stat, but it just feels like there's something there that could be, if you're
But
playing a more optimized combat character, that would be the way I'd go.
well, yeah,
Um,
if you're a solo, yeah, you want to have high reflexes. But
Mhm.
like I guess if you're playing an all solo game, yeah, that would probably happen. But like your med tech or your media is probably not going to be as good at that.
Medtech?
Like
Medtechs need to be able to dodge bullets because they got to get to
but
you,
what
Brent, when you get shot in the spine. Or
what I'm saying is it depends
That
on
was
your
me.
mind.
That was me, Mike.
It depends. Yeah, he got shot in the spine. It depends on it depends on your group because
Mhm.
like Cyberpunk is a game where you definitely can have all combat, but you probably shouldn't. Like if you have a media in your game, you probably should be doing media stuff.
breaking
Yes.
stories.
Yeah, if
Never
you
say
have a corporate exec in your game, they probably shouldn't be getting in gunfights.
every time. That's true. That's true. Now, one other thing I wanted to ask, because we didn't actually deal with this while we were on the recordings, but we did deal with this in the home table, is luck. Now, we've seen a few different iterations of luck in terms of like spending advantage, adding dice to your overall luck, the overall roll after you roll it. But here in Cyberpunk, what you do is you have a luck score that you derive a luck pool from, and before you roll, supposedly, you're supposed to spend luck in order to create a higher value potentially. And I was wondering, did you like that version of luck, or how did you feel about that?
I like anytime I can modify rolls. I mean, seriously, anytime that there's a mechanic where I can try and mitigate the luck of random rolling
Mhm.
to make my character feel competent, I like.
Sure.
And it isn't, and I don't feel like it's crazy. It's not like it's not a stat that's like a 30. It's like I think mine was 5.
Yeah,
Yeah.
mine was 7, which is one off of 8, which is the highest a level 1 can have.
Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
I I liked it because you can, if you got a big roll coming up and you want to really make sure that you don't miss, you've got a chance to spend it. You're probably not using it on a random thing where you don't care if the outcome work, if it works or not. But you have at least an opportunity to modify it. Like doing it after the fact and knowing that you missed by 1 changes the way that it works and probably breaks it a little bit because like if I've got 7 and I really think I need to do it, I might invest 4 so that I've got some left over. But,
But
but maybe
even
it's such a big thing that I just go, we're going all 7.
but yeah, even then though, it's probably one roll, and it's
Yeah,
probably maybe that one roll is a big roll, but it's probably one roll, and it's a really finite resource that
it's
won't
true.
refresh until the next time you play potentially. So I mean, and then you can make arguments that if you're in the middle of a scenario, it doesn't refresh then; it will refresh,
Mhm.
when the adventure's over or something. Like I
Mhm.
think so. I think it's like I said, I like those kinds of mechanics because it helps me mitigate the fact that I roll like dog shit sometimes.
Yeah. I've always viewed luck as kind of a role that got you that helped push you into a success. So that, and like, and maybe that's just my perspective on it, because there is something strategic to what you're saying. And we experienced that a little bit in DC 20, is that you could give yourself multiple advantages if you really felt you needed to succeed on it up front. But in this one, I feel like with the point system though, it feels like it's there's a high percentage that you're just like, oh, I didn't need to have spent it. Like there, you know what I'm saying? Like, and it may always be the case, but it's one of those, because you spend it up front, then you roll a 10 and then you roll a 6. You're like, oh well, I
Well, yeah,
got it.
but even then, like
Mhm.
it's not about it's about a safety net. So
Yeah,
it's like saying a trapeze artist is disappointed that the net's there because it didn't have to catch them the time that they didn't fall.
Fair
Like
enough.
like that's so like spending the points is like I really want to make sure this happens, so I'm going to spend
Mhm.
this just to make sure that if I roll bad, I have some safety net.
Okay.
Um, and so
Yeah.
that's how I feel about it. And I'm the one that's most likely going to enjoy that stuff because like I said, I usually roll like shit. So like anytime I can modify a roll, I'm all for it because it'll
Mhm.
probably help me be successful in a situation where I probably will not hit it by 1 point or 2 points. So if I'm like, I'm spending all 5 of my luck points to make sure this happens.
Sure. Yeah, because my initial reaction to the spending luck beforehand is that I like to have it be a relevant spend, if that makes sense. But I don't know if but first of all, I don't know if having luck come in every arc or every scenario or whatever it is, because it says every session. So if you're doing normal 4-hour sessions, I can see how luck kind of manages itself. But for us, because we do 2-hour sessions, that would be a lot of luck all the time.
I don't think it would be. I disagree, because like I said, it's a finite resource and it's not very
Mhm.
much.
Yeah.
Like it's maybe 8 points, which is a +3 3 times. I don't think, or +4 twice. Like I just don't think there's going to be that many. I don't think there's going to be that many I don't think there's going to be that many game breaking rolls, and there's still a chance you might not succeed. And I think
Oh,
that's
yeah.
what, and I think that's what makes it. I think that's what makes it balanced, is the fact that you could waste it
Mhm.
easily,
Yeah.
and there's not that much. Like if I could use it all the time, like yeah, like I said, if it was a pool of 30 points or something like that, I would say
Yeah.
it's it's super powered, but it's if I could add
Sure.
+5, I mean, it's pretty different than I'm adding +5 to my roll every time, like in DC 20,
Right. That makes sense.
which was also cool. I also really like that, by the way.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, no, I was just pointing out some rules that I at least thought were worth mentioning, because
Mhm.
they were the areas that seemed less intuitive to me, I guess. Because
And
studying beforehand.
And if you're using it on other stuff, like if somebody feels like that perception rule is really important, like it's not just a combat stat.
Mhm.
It's like,
Right.
oh, I think we really need to know what's going on. I'm gonna
Mhm.
roll. I almost use it on my tactics roll. I almost use
Yeah.
luck on my tactics roll to kind of determine what we should do.
Yeah.
Stealth is another good one. Like all of that stuff that you might see important. So
Yeah.
I think I think between being able to waste it and it not being a super high thing, I think it's pretty well
Yeah.
balanced, really.
I do
So
too.
I think that, I think that's pretty much the mechanics of the flow of it. I mean, the good news is that the game, once you get practiced at the game, I can see it being a very fast game where you can really focus on just being the coolest, out on the edge, cyberpunk edge runners that you can be. We're not there yet, but it does feel like, with a few more sessions, we'll be kind of old hats at this. And I think that
Mhm.
that's where this game probably is going to shine the most, because I do feel like, um, in the beginning, it's going to feel a little intimidating, and even with cheat sheets, it felt like I had to be referencing
There's a
how
lot of
to.
charts. It's a chart.
Yeah,
It's
a
a
lot of chart game.
traditional. It's a trad game. It's
Yeah,
got charts and
That's
yeah,
true.
charts
crunchy
upon charts.
mechanics, and yeah.
Yeah,
So
and so let's move on to just advice in general. Like from your experience, I know Brent, you're the other person who ran here. Do you have any advice if somebody were to pick up this game and do it for the first time, and what would that advice be?
use cheat sheets. Like if you think you're gonna have to reference it, have a cheat sheet instead of trying to look it up in the book. If you're
Mhm,
playing, even if you're playing online and you're looking it up in a PDF, have cheat sheets, have bookmarks. I think that's the biggest thing, just for speed of play. Um, make sure that I think that's the biggest thing, is just make sure that you know and if you and have stats, like make sure you have the stats down so you can reference them fairly easy if you have guys that they're fighting or whatnot.
mhm,
And then the only other thing that I would suggest, and I suggest this for all games, is remember, it shouldn't all be about combat all the time. Unless that's the type of game that you're playing. If you have a group of 3 solos who approach every problem like a hammer, like
mhm,
that's different. But if you have a
That's
media,
true.
if you have a media or a corporate exec, they should
mhm.
probably be doing those things. Or God forbid, if you decided to let one of your players play a netrunner, they should be doing netrunner things.
We had a lot of discussions about netrunners.
I will say that is my other thing, especially if you're new at the game. Probably stay away from netrunners a little bit, just because they do play a different game.
Mhm.
They do play a game by themselves.
Yeah. Well, I have to say that it does feel like with this game, you're going to think a lot like I think you're going to have, if you've played D&D, you're going to feel kind of at home with this. Just the way you get to your skill checks is going to be very simple. But honestly, know your DVs and, just know what kind of difficulty things kind of are off the top of your head, because that's going to be the fastest way in my impression from these first few playthroughs that we have, is like knowing what skills are out there and knowing what difficulty values that you can challenge your players with, and knowing what's reasonable. Because this game, what I thought was interesting is that it's a higher than your DV. And so
Yeah, not a
the
match.
ties
Yeah.
go to the defender. That was a little bit in my brain to like remember to go, oh, DV is 15. You rolled a 15. You
Don't win.
did not pass.
Yeah.
Oh, whoops. You didn't pass. Tie goes to the defender. So in this case, the skill check. So that was kind of a little bit to wrap my head around. But then past that, honestly, I agree with Brent 100%. You need cheat sheets in this. Just make them, find them online, because the book can be a little bit unwieldy, to try to pull out in the middle of that firefight, to try to be like, okay, which one do I need? Just make the cheat sheet of this stuff that you're still a little bit,
and make them for your players too. If you think there's
Mhm.
something players need, have those cheat sheets available.
Yeah. Let them participate. Let them know what it is. And I mean, if they'll hold you to account, because if you say it's 30 meters, they'll know exactly what their DV is to hit, unless the person has a reflex save. Do they a lot of reflex save? I don't know. Reflex save, whatever it is. Dodging bullets reflex. So in terms of replayability, I think we're probably going to play this again in the future. We're about to start a Coriolis campaign, hopefully, in the next little bit. That's going to carry us on a little bit of time, and in between arcs, or whenever we kind of need a break, I want this to be a game that we kind of revisit. But what about you guys? Could you guys see playing either longer games, more games? What do you guys feel
I
about?
like Cyberpunk quite a bit. So yeah, I could see playing it more often.
I'd like to play. I'd like to probably, start a campaign, see what it's like, see what happens.
Yeah. Did you guys, and I don't think we really talked about improvement points and how you get improvement points in the game. But there's not really levels in Cyberpunk Red.
Mhm.
There's really just, you get improvement points, then you level up whatever you need to level up to be the better edge runner. So I think, much like other games where there's kind of like levelless systems, really the stories that your character accumulates is kind of the stuff that helps them be cool. And I think that's just as a,
I mean, there's skill points, and then your ability points, and then your reputation.
yeah, those things. Building reputation is really cool. So there's a little bit of mechanics involved in that, but I do think that you just, tell your stories, have fun with it. And because it's Cyberpunk and it seems to have done Cyberpunk really well, this is what you need. I think this hits that spot really well, and much differently than Shadowrun, because I really haven't played a lot of Cyberpunk games myself. But
No, Shadowrun's totally different. Like
Mhm.
it's a different aesthetic. I still prefer it, the setting, but it's a very different aesthetic than
yeah,
regular Cyberpunk. They're very different games.
they are. So final verdict. I personally love the game. I think if you haven't put it out there, you should try it. I mean, while there's maybe some quibbles to, get through and stuff like that, I'm sure home brewing this is not hard. I want to say now.
I don't think so.
But at least at this point, it doesn't appear to be hard. So it appears to be a good system to run, honestly. And it appears to be a good system for a modern setting. So I dig it.
Yes.
Well,
What about
near
you guys?
modern, future setting.
Oh, sure. Near modern.
Yeah.
Well, we're almost there.
We got the dystopia part, not the cool parts. No cyber eyes or cyber limbs or wired reflexes.
They're working on it.
Have you heard some of the things that happen to those people that get those, high tech replacements and stuff? Like, I guess there was one guy who had gotten like a pair of replacement eyes and he could finally see, but then like the warranty ran out and the company was no longer doing. So
Well,
they're just,
yeah.
like,
I mean,
obsolete hardware.
repo is probably scarily closer to the truth, but
That would not be fun.
Yep. Earn the dystopia, not the rest of the cool stuff.
yep. We're in exactly. We got the dystopia, but not any of the cool parts.
Jeff, what about you? Final thoughts?
Final thoughts. I really liked it. Short exposure. Want to play more. Would like to explore some other classes. Would like a little bit longer setting, see what leveling up's like, and feel what it's like to become better at some of that stuff. I don't know. Really want to play more. So definitely
Okay.
definitely good.
Yeah, it's very good.
Yes. Well, now, unlike my Steam library, which is still woefully unplayed, there's a lot of titles in there that need some attention. One title off the bucket list. Check. Done. Still got more, but so I'll throw it out back to the people watching this. If you made it this far, thank you, of course. If you have your own games that are on that bucket list, what games do you want to play? What have you always like? It's been on your shelf, or you've always heard about it, just haven't had a chance to play it. Let us know. Hit us in the comments. And Jeff, how else can they talk to us if they want to go somewhere
You can
else?
find us on most social media. We are at Rollwise. You can also email us, rollwiseguys@gmail.com.
And I wanted to thank all of the commenters, the folks who leave comments and join our table and discuss with us. Thank you. And as always, roll well, roll wise, and be safe out there, everybody.